And speaking of which, Sue's already got the presentation up. Thank you so much.
Sorry. No, I was there and then I went, I could see it was a mistake and I took it down and I fixed it back up. Is that all right?
That's perfect. That'll be
Okay.
fine if you can just leave that there. Now, Sue, are you expecting Katherine to join?
Yep. I
Okay.
am. She must have been caught up with something. I'll just text her.
Very, very understandable.
We can start and she'll jump in when here.
All right. Well, we'll do that. Thanks for the invitation there, Sue. And good morning, Jen. And we've got a few extra folks here. All right. Well, what I'll do first is just an acknowledgement of country. I'd like to acknowledge the Yuggera, Jagera, Turrbal, Yugambeh and Kombumerri peoples on whose unceded lands the campuses of Griffith are based. And welcome everyone to our lightning talk for today. Talks for today. We've got an hour, so I won't dally. We have 3 presentations. We've got Katherine Main and Sue Whatman first. With a presentation, Intentional Pedagogies for Value-Based Outdoor Education. The second presentation is Danielle's, Citizen Adapters, AI, Multilingual Health Communication, Students Supporting Industry. And third, Christine will present on a dialogic sensibility, understanding the co-construction of leading and learning in school. So we have some serious topics to cover in such a short time. I'll hand over without further ado to Sue. You take it away, Sue. We'll spend about, sorry to interrupt again, 10, 15 minutes at most on your presentation, just to give us a little bit of time to discuss. So take it away.
No worries. We've actually done an internal division of labour and Katherine's going to start.
Oh, wonderful. Morning, Katherine.
Morning, everybody. Sue, are you happy to push the button to?
Yep. Can you see it?
Away. Pardon?
Can you see it?
Yep, sure can. Okay. So Sue and I are currently working with a Christian youth camp, and our presentation today is about the work that we've done to date, and also then looking forward to the things that we're working on in future. And what we were originally invited to evaluate their programs and help them to redevelop them to embed more intentional pedagogies for value-based outdoor education, which is their point of difference as a Christian-based youth group. Okay, so next one. So the camp and our study aims. So what we were aiming to do was to identify aspects of the current programs that build students' overall well-being, and in particular their emotional resilience and sense of belonging. And it would seem, I guess, a big ask when you're going in to look at those types of things within programs, because the students that come on these programs, particularly year 5, are often only there for 2.5 days, 3 days. So it doesn't seem a long time to have a significant impact on these young people, but there's certainly strong evidence to suggest that they do. So if we have a look, then what Sue and I have done is we did a bit of a reconnaissance to have a look at what the camp leaders actually do. So a day in the life of a camp leader, they start the day, depending on which school they're at working with, they do an orientation with them, and they do a group session, getting to know them. The way that they get to know the students and their names so quickly is really impressive. And then they work through a series of activities that are geared at particular age groups. So obviously the students in year 12 do different activities to the students in year 5, but they have a whole range of challenging games, cooperative games, and activities that generally put the kids just outside of their comfort zone and different things, but they work really hard at bonding the kids. And so there's a lot of intentional teaching and those opportunities to talk and work with the students on their own, and they work from a very strong Christian ethos, and so the values that they're trying to implement are based on what they call their Thrive program, and their Thrive program is 5 pillars, and those 5 pillars talk about resilience, and they call it antifragility. They talk about being, good communicators in touch with Christ. So there's all these things that underpin what they do, and we could see that these things were actually being embedded within there, but not necessarily as overtly as it could be. And so if we go to the next one, what we looked at then was designing our research. And so we had a look first at all of the documents that were there. So they were things like their front viewing pages that they had on their website, their program documents, their induction documents, anything that we could find that was related to their programs. And we then did a number of observations. So we worked over a period of a week and a half where Sue and I actually swapped, and we had each one of the camp leaders at one particular location, because they've got several locations across southeast Queensland and northern New South Wales, and we shadowed rather one of the camp leaders each. And so each of the camp leaders across that week and a bit were shadowed by one or both of us. We looked at the types of things we were looking for was how they set the activities up, their interactions with the kids, their safety processes, and then their opportunities for reflection and the other things that they did with the students to actually facilitate and embed and try and teach some of these Thrive principles. And then we did interviews with each of those 5 leaders as well, and they're about 30 minutes each. Some were a little bit longer and some were a little bit less, and we combined those. We triangulated then the things that they said that they were doing or hoping to do in the documents, what we observed, and then what they said that they were doing all together. You're on mute, Sue.
Oh, am I?
Oh, not anymore.
Okay. We thought we'd just show you what, like, our mud mapping with coding, and we wrote lots of things, and so we started off with about 16 sort of things that we thought we were seeing that coming out of the interview transcripts, and again from having already written. So we didn't film them, and that's because this was a combination of state school and private school students, and getting filming for it was going to take too long, so we got permission to take notes, thick notes. So we wrote lots of notes about what we saw on those observations, and we reduced it down to what we thought were 6 sort of areas around. They spoke about, and we drew inferences about their background, what kind of induction they had, what they thought the purpose of the camp programs were, what were the strategies and pedagogies that we saw and they identified, what they identified as they thought was a successful camp, but what was their own success measures for the successful 3-day program. And then we used the concept of self-efficacy to drill in on things that they felt helped them in their role as camp leaders. And those 6 were then what we sort of tried to identify, like what was it, what else about it that they seemed to have a lot of commonality with, and then what else that they also, because we were asked to help them improve their program, so we were looking also for things that we thought we could help them with and further in terms of unpacking those 6 areas further. And we're just going to look at 2 of them. And one of them was that their background. So the camp leaders are not teachers. There is a teacher who's the principal, and there's another teacher who is one of the program development leaders. And then most of the staff are people who've got a Cert 3, either in things like high ropes, bushwalking, the outdoor outdoor leading, like whatever, all the different names you would find for the kinds of skills that you would see at an adventure camp, an outdoor camp. So that was the qualification side of their background. A number of the camp leaders were also doing teacher education, so they were partway through a degree, but mostly they weren't. But so the thing they actually had in common was that they were friends, that they were recruited into being camp leaders through church networks, and that oftentimes they were actually all from a big chunk of the staff all from the same church, even though the venue was not owned by that church. So the networks of being, as what one of the leaders said, brothers and sisters in Christ, was actually a really important means for that group of people to come together and deliver the ethos of the Thrive program. And they moderated that intentional pedagogy to share love of Christ in their activities, depending on who the school was that was attending. So if it was a Christian school attending, they would amplify that. They would involve prayer sessions. They would have that sort of thing in their program. If it was a state school, well, then they'd pull that out. But what they saw then was that sharing love of God was part of caring for young people and teaching them to care for each other. So one of the other things that we thought obviously was really important was, and then they needed to think about intentionally, how do you do this, was the people they were following, like who helps who, and we saw that the average age, they're quite young, and the average age was less than 2 years of being in the centre. They moved in and out of the centre quite quickly. There weren't people that had been there forever and ever. So how they did their induction and mentoring was highlighted as being really important. And then but they also then needed to think about, well, what's your sustainable and informed approach to that kind of mentoring, which had been identified as important. Now we're up to 9 minutes 38, so I'll just say now that we also we've asked to kind of report on this. We've done a professional learning day with the group just last month, and we went through these kinds of things that would help them with developing their own program and thinking about what are your skill sets that you'd like to work on more. And so they identified things like, we want to work on more our soft skills. They want to work more on managing, challenging, just like teachers, challenging ranges of engagement that students show, and that they also want to work on their ability to assist students with reflection, with coming back around to, well, what does antifragility mean? What does emotional resilience and thriving in their sense of their philosophy, what does that mean for them as young people as they exit the camp? So they're the sorts of things that we are going to continue to work on with them. We're going to go back, and the second part of, so phase 2 of research approval is to get ethical approval from some of the schools to give the students a survey that's a social emotional survey, and to interview the school teachers who accompany the kids on camp, because so far we've only collected data off the camp staff themselves. That's it. That's 11 minutes. There we go.
Thank you, Sue. Thank you, Katherine. And I'm clapping also for the amazing timing. That looks like you've really thought about this, even practiced it. What questions do people have? This is an extremely thought-provoking overview. What questions do people have? Maybe while people are sorting their questions, so you said that you were asked to help improve the program. Why do you get a sense of why it was that it was thought the program could be improved?
Actually, I think that they this came about because the principal was listening to Katherine one day. So I actually think Katherine's probably better placed to answer this question. They made the initial contact, and it was from a professional learning event.
Yeah, I did a masterclass at the Adolescent Success Conference that the principal attended, and from that he realised that some of the things that they thought they were doing explicitly, they weren't. And so we talked a little bit about their program and some of the things that they were doing and how they could do them better. And he then invited us to come and have a look. And so I invited Sue to join because we're partners in crime. But also it's outdoor ed is really more her wheelhouse than mine. So my area really is around the wellbeing and the social and emotional competencies, but combining together, we felt like we had a strong team.
Okay.
And they do a lot of adventure, like they know, and literature will tell you that adventure-based programs, outdoor education programs, they are all well aligned with this their philosophy and the sorts of things that they hope would bring about these outcomes with students. But also given their backgrounds, you know, they're coming in with really technical qualifications to do with delivering the physical activity, not coming in with a more of a educational philosophy, like a tech teacher education background. They needed more help with drawing those connections between, well, okay, let's unpack these activities that you're doing. When you're doing you know, the groups building, and this Katherine's favourite activity, building the raft with that zero guidance. So zero skill teaching, no how do you do a knot. They're just given a big bunch of floatable pipes and ropes and say, off you go, do it. And so, like, how do they know then that they have either provided just enough of what it needs to get to be successful, or whether or not the complete failure is, because sequenced failure is a purpose of a lot of outdoor challenge activities, that failing and then failing and then failing and then finally getting it is the point of doing it. But again, do they know enough about that, the concept of sequence failure, and how does that relate to bringing and drawing on strengths of different children at different times? So it's really helping them to draw the lines between, yes, you are doing stuff that has got evidence base behind it, and now here is that evidence base, and here are the things that you actually do that support that as an intentional pedagogy.
Okay. Sue, that's a new word for me. I love new words. Sequenced failure, love it. Christine has a question, and we've got about 3 minutes left for this segment. Christine, take it away.
Thank you. Thanks very much for your very interesting overview of your project. Just a quick question, really. I know that education is pretty well awash with terms like intentional, explicit, direct, structured teaching or instruction, those sorts of things. I'm just wondering, do you or how do you differentiate between these terms in your work, or is not particularly for an outdoor program, it might not be even relevant, but I know there's kind of an interchangeability about some of those terms, and I'm just wondering, is it important to theorise those for this kind of work? That's all.
Yeah, thanks, Christine. That's a really good point. And I think that probably comes from the work that I do in with middle years and middle schooling, because we talk a lot with young adolescents and their stage of development. And we talk about intentional pedagogies, and those, what we define those are the pedagogies that are age appropriate and have been evidence-based in making, when they're clustered, making the most significant difference for the educational outcomes of students. So when we talk about intentional pedagogies, we're very explicit about what they are, and they come under a series of I guess headings. So there's intentional cognitive strategies, and there's intentional physical strategies that are age appropriate for that, because in the camps that we're looking at, they're year 5 to 12, so they really fit in with that middle young adolescent learner.
All righty.
Basic, like, again, a lot of those activities that they choose, if you go back into the history of them, they fit really neatly with some of that stuff that, you know, we've done in the past around the Parker Palmer, the circles of trust, the warm and demanding, be engaged, don't fly under the radar, all those kind of concepts that you get from that kind of reading. But again, that the camp staff, like, I know that, and I might plug that in, and you'd find that in literature, but they don't have that sense that there is design behind those activities that aligns nicely with their Thrive philosophy, But again, they need just a little bit more help in making those connections between that and between what it is that they're already doing, which they learned from watching someone else, which they learned from that mentoring phase of induction and ongoing professional learning.
Thanks, Sue. And that brings us very nicely to the end of this segment. Once again, thank you. Can we go now to Danielle? Are you able to share your screen and take it away?
You're on mute still.
I had this happen yesterday, frozen teams. All right, well, so while Danielle's restarting, I a bit like you, Christine, I was drawn to some of the language in Katherine and Sue's presentation. You know, I was kind of wondering, are there unintentional pedagogies that you saw in the research? Or is that a counterpart? You're muted, Sue. Is that a counterpart to intentional pedagogies? And do you look for unintentional pedagogies?
I wasn't looking. I'd have to think more about that. But certainly we saw pedagogies from school staff that undermined the intentional pedagogies of the camp staff, like some stuff that was gobsmacking actually. And I thought that if anything, it was a study of how there was wider school development issues going on with the staff that had come on camp with their students. But yeah, there was definitely examples of, so camp leaders modelling the sort of leading to support and trust and get along with each other, so particularly around like a grade 7 age, and then teachers doing things that came along and undid that, just with their existing way of relating to their students, presumably in school. So it was almost like sometimes those children were better off not having any of their staff supervising them, and that they should have been just in the hands of the camp leaders because of the way in which engagement interactions with their regular teachers was antithetical to the Thrive philosophy.
Are you able to share any of those ways in which those teachers undermine the work of the camp staff?
I'll pick one, Katherine, you pick another one if you like. The number, but the one that really stood out for me was right at the end. They bring them back in the hall before they get on the bus, and it's meant to be like, this is your last opportunity for feel good. What have we all learned? What are we taking away from our 3 days growing together? And the leader at the front was doing a great job with quite a difficult camp group, but there was a couple of kids just talking down the back. Now, you know, most of us would probably just walk around to the group, hand on the shoulder, shh, you know, listen, pay attention. One of the teachers sitting up on a table at the back, arms folded like this, and goes, "Oi," whatever the kid's name, "shut up." I just thought, I couldn't believe that just happened in front of the whole group. The way that teacher engaged with that child when they're in the summative and bringing it back around. And so and the poor camp leader down the front, like, she's the only way that could be addressed is if the camp leader principal would speak probably directly to the school principal about that. Like, there was no way in her power relationship, she could have undone the damage that did at that moment.
Katherine, do you have an example that you can share? And you might have
You're
to
muted too.
Sorry, probably a couple, but the one that stands out for me was one where a big thing about the camp is safety, and actually making, you know, the students there and the teachers, even though the camp leaders run the class, the activities, the teachers really need to be there to support and encourage, because they know the kids best. You know, they do that. And there was one that Sue was, I think Sue observed, but we talked about quite a lot, where, and I'm still horrified, where they were doing surfing. And so there were really explicit instructions, as you can imagine, having all of these, you know, 13, 14-year-olds on surfboards out in the surf. And the teacher just grabbed a surfboard and went out and did their own thing, surfing in behind the waves and stuff, and just left the group. But just doing something that was, you know, no way would we have let the kids do, because it was unsafe, and they'd been given explicit instructions not to do that sort of thing. And also then we were down an adult, you know, supervising and watching and monitoring, you know, quite a high risk activity. So those sorts of things where the teachers actually didn't, I guess, understand how important their expertise and their relationships and understanding the kids that were on the camp were to the camp, to supporting the camp leaders. So
teachers.